buffering. We're like, oh, there we go.
Oh, no, it does have an announcement. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The broadcast is live. Hello, everyone. My name is April.
I'm G.
And it is 2:00 on Thursday, February 11th, 2:00 Eastern Standard Time. And that means you are watching the How to Be Cheeky visual podcast, or perhaps you're listening to it, or perhaps you're going to listen or watch this after right now and today. So regardless, here we are. We're here to talk about some more stuff. I feel like every podcast should start this way, which is like, we have no idea.
We're here to talk about some stuff.
We have no idea what's going on. We're just going to jibber jabber. Yeah. But in reality, we actually really want this to be valuable to the listener or to the watcher. G is going to hit us with the recap of what we discussed last week, and then we are going to hop right into what we are going to discuss this week and why. G.
Awesome. Yeah. So last week we talked about a million things. I think we started in one place, we ended in a totally different place. But I think the overall gist of it was like, why are we cocktailian people, bar restaurant people on a podcast about starting a business? And it's because coming from the bar and service world, we realized that it's not something that's really talked about. There's not a moment during family meal or roundup to be like, so how are you all going to start your own business and stop working for tips? But it's a thing that a lot of people in the restaurant world really want to do. And sometimes they start a business, they become consultants, or they open their own restaurant. And we'd like to share the things that we've learned. And we'd also like to invite knowledge from other folks on their journeys and how they've done it as well to help us in our journey. And that brings us to a lot of others. We were talking about, qualities you should look for in your first hires. We were talking about questioning capitalism at some point.
Getting out of your own way to get started, like mentally, what do you have to do to kind of like put yourself in a position to feel confident and really optimistic about starting a business?
I think my favorite part of last week too is when you were saying that in a moment of great unrest, like the pandemic, there are so many things that are being reconfigured in the structures of our lives. And how can we look at that for ways to restructure our own lives to make space to change our perception about how it's going and how we can make space to follow our dreams or take a step in the direction of things that we have wanted for a long time.
Yep. Yeah, there's something interesting, and I already am going to steer us a little off path here, but there's something that I've heard about like habit change in general, in relation to weight loss or money habits or whatever it may be, where it's saying in order to change a habit, you need to change your identity. And I thought that was really, like that shit is like deep,
Kinda.
It's real. And I think that one of the identities that I had coming through the industry, and we've talked about this again a lot offline, and I've had this conversation with a lot of other peers in the industry, but like I came into this thing with, I would say, close to zero financial literacy. I grew up working for tips, again, in restaurants for almost 17 years. Nobody's teaching you, and by the way, nobody's teaching this in school either. But nobody's teaching you, okay, what you have to do with your tips, how much you should be saving for rent, how much you should be putting away for savings, how much should you have in like a rainy day fund. So like I came up through it that way. And I know that so many of our peers are in that situation. And broadly, I know that in the US, as it is, like just generally speaking, I think it's some very small percentage, like 90% or 85% of the US has reported if they were hit with a $400 medical emergency, they would not have the money to pay for it. And so I don't claim to be a financial planner or, be incredibly well schooled in this at all. But I would just say from my experience, going from a bartender solely working for tips to going to a consultant to going to starting my own business and learning about raising capital and like financing a business and paying employees and hiring people. Like, I feel like there's been a lot of learnings there. So anyway, I know that you have G being kind of a little bit earlier in your career, but having made some really great inroads. I know you've got some thoughts and some questions on this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm going to be selfish and maybe take a little bit of this podcast to just get a little bit of a personal mentorship on next steps. Because yes, I definitely see myself at a certain space in my career as a bartender, as a hospitality professional, at the same space as a lot of my peers.
Wait, sorry, can
like,
you go back, G, actually,
yeah.
and say, because again, I gave sort of like a deep dive on my background, but if you want to let people know how long you've been in the industry, like what sort of experience you have in the industry, what your aspirations are, that'd be great.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Okay, so I probably started bartending when I first moved to New York. I was just shy of 18. And I had done some service work prior, but as far as hospitality, that was my first jump into it. And I started as a bartender before I was a server. I think that's kind of like a unique position.
Unprecedented.
Yeah, I think it's definitely kind of like a pretty girl privilege thing where you just like show up and you're like, I'm a bartender. They're like, yeah, whatever, like wear a short skirt and get up there. Yeah, it's fueled a lot of prejudice against whether or not many female bartenders are actually good at bartending. But that was how I started. And it was a lot of, really gross places, not like cocktail bartending at all. And then I started working with an agency that was actually at my university, which I am now the professor of, which is crazy. So Barnard Bartending has an agency that's been running for something like 65 years. And they hire bartenders who are all from the university. They go through a course, they pass this massive exam. And then once you get hired into the agency, you are allowed to pick from a certain quantity of jobs that are all around the New York metropolitan area. The pay is really good. There's great holiday pay. They pay for your cabs. It's a great opportunity for young women to learn how to advocate for themselves, learn a fun side hustle skill, and make money while they're in school. So I did that. And then I think after I graduated, I was a teacher for a second. And I thought that was going to be maybe where my passions lied. And I did that for about a year and a half only before I was like, you know what? I actually can't make enough money being a teacher to afford to live in Manhattan. So I started bartending on the weekends, and that got me into the world of New York City nightlife. So from there, it was like this other crazy road from, video projections to installation art, sculpture art, being a party producer, bartending in nightclubs. And then I realized I was like, okay, the dual life is too much. I can't be like a teacher, Monday through Friday with like elementary school kids and then like living in the clubs on the weekends. So I was like, let me choose. I chose nightlife and hospitality. It just seemed like more fun. And also there was a moment for me where I was like, I need to leave the psychic space of school. Like I felt like I had never left school because even after graduating from university, I just went back into elementary school and middle school and high school. And I was like, I'm reliving my life. I need to leave. And then, that is like the early part of my career where I didn't learn any good cocktail bartending. I think that I actually started to learn proper cocktail bartending, a couple years afterwards, after graduating. And then it just kind of snowballed. And now I would call myself like a fairly decent cocktail bartender. I would work in, only cocktail bars, probably. Yeah. I don't know how to describe it, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe jumping forward like a step. So you've worked in a number of cocktail bars in New York City. You, I know, have entered a number of cocktail competitions and you've done really well. You obviously have been involved with us at Cheeky, and you've, I think, both learned a lot of skills and contributed a tremendous amount of value to us. So we appreciate it. And so I think maybe where we kind of meet with this conversation is you and I have talked about like freelancing and developing your skills and like building a personal brand. Sorry, my air quotes are not on screen. There we go. Building a personal brand and like how people develop their careers. And so maybe that's kind of where the jumping off point is like, what questions do you have as an individual right now?
Okay. So yes, I am at a place where now I'm like the professor of mixology at Barnard College, and I took over that program. I just won an international cocktail competition and am supposedly going to design a spiced rum in St. Lucia with St. Lucia distillers in hopefully as soon as the world opens up. And working with Cheeky, and it's maybe not like cocktail. I'm not making cocktails anymore. I'm not making syrups, but I'm existing in the media space of bars and restaurants and cocktail bartenders.
Yes.
So if I had still been, if not for the pandemic, I think that my natural next step I would have thought was to be like a beverage director or a bar consultant. Being that bars and restaurants aren't open, that was, it wasn't that I fell out of love with that idea. It's just not available right now. So I still want to, I think, be a consultant. I think that it's the next career possibility that allows me to work with my brain rather than my body, which is something that I always wanted to kind of do. Like bartending is extremely physical.
Yeah.
Working in restaurants is extremely physical, and it's actually quite dangerous, the work.
Yeah.
And I don't think we talk about it enough. There are way too many uninsured people in the service industry. And it's hard to imagine myself, shaking cocktails, like throwing out my elbows, for much longer.
Yep.
So I want to work with my brain.
Yes. Yeah. So I think when I see this, because again, I have a lot of conversations with friends who are either considering going off on their own, starting to consult, or as we discussed, like trying to open a bar or restaurant. And as I mentioned, I really can't speak to the opening a bar or restaurant, but what I can say is, I think one of the really critical things that you have to do when considering this next step is not just like, what do I like doing and what am I skilled at doing, but it's like, where's the opportunity? Like, is there a need for my type of service? And I do think that most people, myself included, when I started consulting, I just knew that I didn't want to work for other people any longer, which is honestly, that's a totally wonderful and fine catalyst. But then you need to figure out how to find clients, how to present yourself and your offerings, and then how to close deals around it. So I think one of the biggest questions, and again, maybe this is where we start, or maybe this is just for later, but one of the biggest pain points I see with new consultants is, let's just say they say, great, like I'm going to bartend for events and I get to set my own price for the first time. There's no like magic sheet that like sits on the internet where it's like, the price that people pay for event bartenders is such and such and such and such. Or that like the price somebody would pay for you to design a bar menu is, it should be like, $1,000 or $500 or $10,000. So it's quite interesting because I think a lot of people flounder in that place. And I certainly did as well. But there's a number of key things that you can do besides just listening to the rest of our podcast. But one of the key things that you can do most certainly is saying, like, how much do I need the money and want the money? Like, that's a big question. What do I feel is a fair and appropriate price for my time? What is required of me? So understanding what you actually have to do or to perform to like get that money paid. And then really, how am I going to present that information to the client? So I think where some people start, and again, this makes sense, is saying, if I were to have a bar shift, how does what I'm charging compare to that? So some people might say, and again, I see this very frequently where people in metropolitan cities will say, okay, I didn't have a shift scheduled anyway. It's extra money for me. Maybe I set it at like $100 or $150, or maybe I set it at $500. It really just depends kind of where you're starting, again, what you're comparing it to, but it has to feel worthwhile. But I also think that you should intrinsically feel like you're delivering value for that. So for example, if like one person is like, hey, we're going to have a 3-person event. It's going to be, 45 minutes long. How much would you charge? And you're like, I'm going to charge $1,000 just because that's what I think I'm worth. You're probably not going to get that many clients. It's really not that hard to do that. Like, you're not traveling so far, or maybe it's a virtual class. So I think that's those are some of the considerations at hand.
Right.
G, do you want to kind of like formalize any of that, or hit me back with anything?
Well, I'm thinking about something that happened to me recently in which I considered getting a barista gig. I told you about this. I was I think it might be nice to like barista for like one day a week. And this scenario went around that, they found out that I was a bartender. They looked at my CV. They looked at the things that I had done, and they found that I had consulted on bar menus before. And they were like, well, we have a liquor license. We'd love for you to come in as a barista. But, when things get better with the pandemic, like if you'd like to, like build out our bar program or show us how to do takeaway cocktails, because they looked at Cheeky and everything, and they were like, oh, so you know how to like set up our bar for takeaway cocktails. I was like, yeah, totally. I was like, it's easy. Like, we could definitely do it. Are you interested? And they were like, yeah, we'd love to do takeaway cocktails. We want to do bottled cocktails on the table. We want to do like single, handmade sodas, all these things. I was like, wow, that sounds awesome. Like, I'd love to be involved in this program. You guys seem great. And they were like, so how much would you like to be paid? And I was like, okay, so I came in for a barista position. And a barista position is really different than building out your bar program, training you owners and your bartenders, and like designing multiple like takeaway, large format, bottled sodas, everything. I was like, that's a consultant position.
Yep.
And I was like, so I was like, for hourly, I was like, I'd like, I highballed. I was like, I want $20 an hour as a barista,
Yep.
Which in the Netherlands is like, no, it's not how much you get paid. But I was like testing the waters.
Yep.
And I didn't actually say this, but the last time I think I designed a bar menu, I had so much, they waffled on the price so much. And I finally came to it where I was like, I will give you the bar book, build out the bar, like buy all of your ingredients, like do all your ordering sheets, set up your inventory, train your bar staff, literally like set up everything. And I was like, and I want to be paid hourly for my time. And I want $500 on top of that for the book. And that was probably the most I got paid for like a consultancy position the last time I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I kind of went at it like, this is what I feel like this is a lot of work and what I think it's worth.
Yep. So there's another angle, I think, to look at this as well. So people are always a little bit funny about budgets. Sometimes so if you can say, let's just say that I am the potential consultant. Actually, why don't we do this? Why don't we do a role play where you pretend that you're the owner? I think this will be fun. I hope it'll be fun.
Wait, am I the owner?
You're the owner. I'm the consultant.
Okay. Do I have money? Am I shady or am I
cool?
You
just I would say don't go too hyperbolic. Let's try to make this like a scenario that is really like realistic. Seems realistic. Yeah. So
is it a new opening or have I been established? Because I feel like that's a big difference.
Up to you.
Okay.
Go. You go first.
Hi, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
Looked over your CV. I looked over your CV. It seems great. I can tell you have a lot of experience. And as you know, we're looking for somebody to lead our bar team. So we need a head bartender who will have a shift once a week or twice a week if you'd like. And then one other day we need you to come in and just do admin. Have you done anything like this before?
I definitely have. I think a bigger question that I have for you, or a place where I'd love to start, is what are the sort of requirements to like get your bar program up and running? Like, do you need cocktails developed? Do you expect to develop a single menu and then have that not change sort of for the long term? Or are you looking for the consultant in this capacity to sort of like seasonally rotate, or even like on a monthly basis, rotate cocktails in and out? So I guess that's my first question, is like, from the creative perspective, like what is your expectation? And maybe I would also love to know what you already have established. Like, do you have your liquor license and your relationship set up with distributors? Do you have your glassware in house already? Like, do you need any sort of other elements of design or I guess like production established before we get started on the creative work?
Mm-hmm. So we have a cocktail menu that has been working for us. One of our partners designed it, who's like a big cocktail guy. But it hasn't changed since we opened. It's definitely not on the level of our competitors. I would like to, be known as not just a cocktail bar, but also a place for food and casual. So we do want to rotate seasonally. And then say there's some kind of event, maybe there's like a football game or it's a holiday. If you could do like a themed cocktail for that, that's something we're looking forward to. We have glassware. We're open to thinking about changing the glassware, but that'll be down the line. I think we need to make some more money with the bar first.
Sure.
And yeah, distributors are set up, but we probably need to order some more premium, special mezcals, like better whiskey selection.
Yep.
But we just need some advice on where to go in that direction.
Okay, got it. And then in terms of sort of ongoing management, I know you had mentioned that there would be like one sort of bartending day and then one admin day. Is sort of managing the staff and training the staff part of this, or is that something that you would handle with your existing management team? And then I would be kind of more like creative and like a little bit of like maintenance.
I think that it would probably be a hybrid in which we are going to have an all staff training to show everyone the cocktails and train them on the cocktails and how the bar program is changing. But as the bar head bartender, we'll definitely need you to just tighten up operations with our bartenders, make sure that, their pours are clean, that they're following, HACCP and food regulations behind the bar. I know that we've had some issues with garnishes and juices going bad, multiple bottles of wine being open and forgotten in the low boys. We'd really like you to take a look at our strategy as a bar team and clean us up.
Okay, got it. But just one clarification. So that would be like sort of all done like at the outset. That's not like an ongoing sort of weekly task.
I think we'll start with at the outset and see how well it sticks.
Yeah, noted.
Right.
Got it. Okay, great. So what I'd love to do then is I'd love to just take this information. I'm just going to jot down what I heard from you of what you're looking for. And then I'd love to kind of just put together a few different ways to look at it so you've got options to choose from. I would love to just ask, though, is there anything else that you think I should know? Like if you've got any particular budgetary restrictions, if you have any a set number of cocktails that you're looking to have on the list, so I have a better understanding of like how many recipes I should be creating, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're not made of money, is what they love to say. We're not millionaires. We just own a restaurant.
Uh-huh.
So we would probably like 8 to 10 cocktails to start.
Yep. And
budgetary restrictions. I mean, how much would you like to make a week? It's usually how we look at it.
Yeah. What I would love to do, so I think I want to work at this the other way, if it's all right with you. I'd love to just like consider all the elements that go into it and then just figure out a few different scenarios, because from my perspective, it's kind of more like what is needed for the task at hand and sort of how much time and effort do I need to invest both upfront as well as sort of ongoing. So if it's okay with you, I'd love to just again be just put this all on paper, and then I'll bring it to you, and then we can have any and all conversations to kind of get on the same page and get started and moving forward, if that sounds good.
Okay, great. So you're going to send me some proposals on how to tackle these things.
Yes.
And then you're going to give me what prices you feel are reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, I would kind of maybe frame it as like a few different options for pricing and for getting what you're looking for, because it ultimately, I may or may not have heard you exactly perfectly, and perhaps you see something even in my notes that you'd like to clarify. So again, I'm very like, I want this to be great for everybody. I want it to work for everybody. So let me just again, put a little bit of diligence on this, get it back to you, and then we can have whatever conversations make sense to put us in a great place.
End scene. And end scene. Because that's a place where I'm like, okay, now I have questions. I don't know how to act beyond this point. Okay.
Great. So here's where I would go from this. My personal, you're good too. We're not made of money. Very good.
I heard that.
Yeah. Perfect. So, so given that, what I would do is the sense that I'm getting, and probably anybody watching or listening also has a similar sense. It sounds like there's a sort of heavy upfront lifting portion of this. And then there's like
Mhm.
some maintenance over time, like on a weekly basis. It also sounds like, and I think that most people who've worked in bars or restaurants know this, typically management underestimates what that commitment might be on a weekly basis. So that should also be factored in as well. So I would probably look at this. I always, again, as a consulting strategy, is I always like to give, unless there's a reason not to, I always like to give 3 different ways to price out the gig.
Mm.
So the recipient, the potential client, has options to choose from. And from my perspective, my time is valued equally in all the scenarios. So for example, I might say, here's like the whole kit and caboodle, like everything you could possibly ask for. This is like everything is priced into this puppy. So that's like on one end. Then the other end is like the very a la carte, like this is literally a menu of services and there's a la carte pricing associated. And then there would be a sort of like medium level hybrid of the two. But again, from my perspective, let's just say, and again, I'm just going to choose numbers out of nowhere. Let's just say I price my recipe development at $150 a recipe or $5,000 a recipe, whatever it is. On the a la carte menu, again, I could list that out where it's like, you can pick and choose, like mix and match, you make this what you want out of this. So this is the price, like this is how I value my time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's obviously, we know that there's really no like IP with cocktail recipes, but how I value my time and like the benefit perhaps that my personal brand and my name will give to that cocktail menu when people see that the cocktail menu is developed by G. Pebenito or April Wachtel or whatever it is, like that is also going to be factored into that pricing and how I come up with that. I think because some of these bigger gigs, for example, there might be an opportunity cost to it. So if I have other gigs on the table, it's like, what am I potentially missing out on if I take this thing? That's one thing to consider. And then the other thing, as I mentioned, that's sort of the outside of the conversation is, do I have any other options whatsoever? So like, even if I value my time at $100 an hour or $1,000 an hour or $20 an hour, if I don't have any other options, I might
I take less?
Yeah. And again, I think you should be very aware that your ego may play some tricks on you in this process. No, because I've seen a lot of people price on principle and not get gigs when they desperately need them. Where it's like, sure, you should charge for your time, but if you can't pay rent and you're holding out at $2,000 an hour, whatever, for like doing a speech or whatever, it's like, you might want to be more amenable to the situation, because keeping your price that high is not going to do you any favors if there's no takers.
Yeah. I also want to ask, so something that I have kind of observed, I'm not going to name any names, but I've observed is bartenders who have, some kind of fame or leverage, who are like super ready. Like people love them. They want them. They're like, yeah, come design our bar, be our head bartenders. And then they go. And then they're like, we're consultants. We've started a consultancy business because they've started consulting. Is there like a downside to not having any kind of infrastructure set up before you take a gig? Like,
I mean, there's always pros and cons of everything. Right. I would say, so in our industry, again, people like, especially with a lot of cash flying around, and a lot of unreported income, I mean, it's like, it's entirely up to you if you want to, not report it, or if you want to have like, be sending out W-9s to all of your potential clients to ensure that there's like a record of, what your income is and if you're paying tax on it or not. So that's one sort of just like logistical thing. I would say that, I don't know, I personally would probably just get started. This is a little bit of a squirrely question because there's a question of liability, for example, where like, if you're technically, if you're an independent contractor, like you should be, and again, I don't know if this is the case in all states, but like in New York, you should be supplying your own insurance unless it's being supplied by your
Whoa.
client. You know
Don't
what I'm saying?
tell
So,
people
no.
that.
So my point
Yeah.
is like, I have never seen a situation personally in which there's been problems with that, but personal liability is a thing. So let me backtrack and just say there's pros and cons to everything.
Mhm.
I would say that the biggest obvious and possible con is if you are unable to speak about yourself and your services in a professional manner, you should give that some thought before you start saying you're open for business. I
Mm.
personally find it to be very irritating when people are like, hey, like let's talk business. And then they've got nothing to offer and nothing to say, because ultimately they might have a service that I want to buy or engage with, but they're not able to speak clearly about it. So I would say if you can define your offering as a consultant, let's just say I do cocktail menus, I do recipe development, I train staff. I think that everybody, and I went through this practice pretty much, I mean, probably within the first year of me starting consulting, is I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I was like, oh, I think I can offer a lot of these different aspects. I'd been a brand ambassador. I have been media trained, and I can train other people on media, on media training as well. So I had basically delineated all these services. And quite frankly, I haven't updated my website in a gazillion years. So some of these may still be on there, but it's basically just saying, what are the things that I think holistically, when put together, represent me as a personal brand or me and my business aspirations. And then go from there. And again, provide a way for people to get in touch with you. So I personally think whether you're doing this all in your Instagram feed or if you have a website,
Mhm.
professional pictures of yourself. So you look like, people like to see a face in particular when it's associated with a service. They want to know something about you and understand where you come from, who you are, what your reputation is. So I personally think everybody starting a consulting business or a personal brand, they need to have a way to get in touch with them. Again, I would say a good looking, high quality photo of themselves, hopefully smiling or looking otherwise approachable. A little bit of a bio. If you had any press, definitely mention that. Also press, and I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but press loves to write about things that press is writing about already. So once you have one piece of press, it gets that much easier to sort of have other press write about you. And they'll do the diligence and look you up and try to figure out who you are and where you come from. And so that's a credibility indicator, is like if you're listing your press or your accomplishments, like your bartending competition, or again, the skills like you have with like content creation. And again, if you have a portfolio of work, even if it's just a few items, I would say show it somewhere, because people are searching for these things. And what you never want to happen is somebody to search for it, find you do the thing, you offer the service, and then they can't see that you offer it. Like you've missed the opportunity. So just give people ways to employ you, basically.
Right. I want to ask if because you had mentioned something that I hadn't even thought about, but the brand ambassadorship. And I know that kind of wasn't on our bill, but I feel like brand ambassadorship is one of the first steps bartenders get, or anybody in service gets, before, to step out from like an hourly job into something that is hospitality adjacent. And I know that for me, that was the first, that and like account managers for spirits distributors were the only sort of people I saw spirits adjacent, bartending adjacent, who seemed to be totally part of the community, but weren't working for tips. Or hourly, or weren't owners, right? So can you, for people who are interested in that, like, how do you get before that? How do you approach those positions, or how do you get ready to maybe apply to be something like or do they choose you? Like, how does somebody become a brand ambassador?
Okay. Well, so first things first is brand ambassadorship as like a viable career, I think really only started like hitting critical mass. I mean, probably a little bit before I started, and certainly has like exponentially grown since then. So let's just say, I think I started as the New York-based brand ambassador for the Bacardi rum portfolio. I think I started in 2011, maybe. And again, there had been brand ambassadors, but I would say that broadly the spirits companies had not invested across different spirits conglomerates, suppliers, whatever, nearly as heavily as they have subsequently done. So what that is, so it's brand ambassadorship, it's trade advocacy. You could also, in many cases, consider it to be like sort of soft sales, but it's basically people who are going into bars and restaurants, having dialogues with the decision makers, and encouraging the awareness and depletion of the products and the brands that they work with. So I would say, certainly in my case, I was working at Lani Kai, which is one of Julie Reiner's old places in Manhattan. So it's a modern tropical cocktail bar, and I think that is one of, if you are looking to become a brand ambassador, that's one of the ways that people find you, is you're working at a well-known place, which is appealing. That means not only are you at a certain level, but you've probably had a certain amount of training. Obviously, people in our industry, in particular, people in the front of the house, I think, tend to be kind of gregarious and charismatic and extroverted, or at least come off as extroverted. And I think that's like a really good position to be in, to get started with your first brand ambassador job. So I would say, in my experience, in many of these cases, people are sort of scouted for it.
Yeah.
But if you are, I mean, I think to be qualified for that type of role, you have to be sort of like, not even mini influencer, but like you have to be ingrained in the community in some way, because the value add that you're delivering is that you are a liaison between the brands and the cocktail community. So that's part of the answer. Did I answer the whole thing, or just part of it? I feel like I've gone off. So.
I mean, yeah. I mean, to kind of what I was a little bit sneakily asking was like, are they chosen? Are they like pre-chosen? And I think the answer is a little bit yes. They're kind of apparent. Like, it's not like somebody from nowhere just sends in a resume on LinkedIn and then gets chosen and nobody knows who they are.
No, I mean, that also happens too. But I mean, if your role is to be engaged with the community, you should have some evidence that you're in the community. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think like anything, absolutely you can send in a cold resume,
right?
Whatever. But this industry, like so many, it's built on the backs of relationships. Right. And so I would say that relationships, credibility, like when I first started working for Bacardi, so I was already teaching cocktail classes at Astor Center, and one of my cocktail classes was in the Wall Street Journal. They were like, if you're looking to learn, cocktailing, go to this class. And that really reinforced, I think, their choice of me for my particular role. Is they're like, wow, like you actually do some shit outside of this, like you are mm-hmm. like pretty legit. And interestingly, and this is kind of going back to the make yourself findable thing that I was saying before.
Yeah.
So I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast, but I met this woman at the bar at Lani Kai when I was bartending. It was just me behind the bar, just her that particular night. It was like the deadest of the starts of nights. We start talking, and turns out she says, what sort of things do you do outside of here or whatever? And I said, oh, I'm really interested in education. I, have been trying to get into education startups here in the city. I love teaching, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, oh, well, my friend is like the GM at Astor Center. They're looking for a beginning cocktail instructor. So I connected with that woman, did like a sample class. That was probably the first and only time I actually did it 2 hours on the dot. After that, I love talking. So I just talked. I tend to talk for too long. But no, it went perfectly. I did it for a class for 40. I taught there for like 6 years. I had 7 different classes that I was teaching there. I ended up teaching at all these different schools. So I was building up my expertise. I was understanding more about these different teaching environments. And I was really focused on the consumer, meaning that so many people in the brand ambassador space were really like leaning in on trade. And I just recreationally was like, I love teaching consumers, which is, again, incidentally how Cheeky started. But all of that to say, I decided one time, I'm like, wow, if you were to search for me as an instructor or for my classes, they're not all in the same place. So I should make my own website. So I made my own website. I basically aggregated all of my public classes onto one page on the site. I linked out to the respective schools. So if somebody came looking for my classes, they could find them all in one place. And interestingly, some months later, I get like a sort of, I'm not going to say panic, let's just say really urgent call from Haven's Kitchen, one of the places where I was teaching. And they're like, the Today Show just called. They're looking for you. You have to call them back. Then I got like a panicked email from one of the producers. They were looking for a cocktail instructor to join Tamron Hall on the Today Show. They like Googled cocktail instructors. They found me. They didn't immediately find my contact. So they found Haven's Kitchen. Haven's Kitchen directed them to my website. They went to my website and then they emailed me. So I ended up going on the Today Show. I mean, that again, I'd already had other press, but that alone generated a whole ton of other press opportunities. So I know that I'm going all over the place here, but I think that's one of the things that I'm saying about Be Findable is like, you really never know what opportunities are floating around there. You need to make your shit findable all in one place, look professional, make people want to reach out to you. And eventually something's going to happen if you're putting in the hard work and the product is good.
And especially now, I feel like bartenders' Instagram accounts, like TikTok accounts, is the number one way we're building our credibility. If we're not already famous, right? If we're not already,
most of us are not famous.
Most of us not famous. Yes. Even people who have like, had brief moments, and it doesn't necessarily last for bartenders. I think that there's a lot of ways bartenders can gain fame in like World Class or Bacardi Legacy. And there's, and you could be super famous in our community, but as far as translating that to other opportunities and in markets that you haven't necessarily worked in, for example, like maybe you want to, be an international consultant and be able to do virtual consultancies, breaking into other markets and other states and other geographies is something that exactly like having your website, having your social media, Twitter, everything up and running and looking great is going to be the number one way people find you and trust you.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say in closing, because again, as always, we're really over time, but
super.
I would say it's super. But I would say in closing, if you are somebody who's trying to figure out how to present your suite of services and present your personal bio and portfolio, there's something called a marketing funnel. And the way people in the direct to consumer space kind of go through the marketing funnel is different than the way people in the sort of B2B space go through the marketing funnel. The point is there is always research that's happening. Like if you're looking for a service or if you're looking for a product, even in your own life, look at the way that you search for these things. If you're trying to hire I'm just trying to think of a realistic thing. If you're trying to hire like a handyman to hang something in your house, where do you look for them in the first place? How do you determine if they're capable of doing this? How do you determine if you trust them to come into your home? And obviously we're in the virtual space right now, so there's less of this. But if you're going to be going into people's homes and doing like private parties, for example, and you're like a 1, 2, or 3 person sort of group, like consultant group doing this, how do you make sure that people feel comfortable asking you to come in there? Client testimonials. Again, pictures of yourself smiling, looking approachable. Other pictures establishing professionalism. Other, again, helpful like criteria, like saying, we do weddings, bar mitzvahs, baby showers, blah, blah, blah. We do custom pricing. We have a la carte pricing if you're just looking for a single bartender. Like, make it look professional and try to minimize the friction for your potential customers. So that's all I have for today. I know, again, we're always like going all over the place, but I hope that that's, here's the thing. Starting a business is messy. Starting a business is messy. Figuring out your kind of reason to be is messy. And so it's going to take some practice and it's going to take some iteration. And it's always, just as we're doing right now, it's always better to, once you've gotten some clarity around it, bounce it off other people. Ask them to take a look at your website. Ask them what their impression is. Ask them what questions they may have about your service or your suite of services. I can guarantee you there's going to be stuff you didn't think of and only shows up when other people take a look at it.
Right. I know you just said in closing, but I do want to just say that we have been so many episodes saying, having a business that's service first is a great way to start funding to be able to go into another sort of business that is consumer goods. And I feel like consultancy is it? I feel like it is. It's that service first business that could possibly fund an object-oriented business.
Sure. I think you're in computer language, programming language mode.
I'm like, you said object-oriented programming. I know, you're right. I am leaving the public sector. I'm becoming less and less a bartender and more like a computer hermit every day.
Like glasses, you turn to square, look like a little old Mac Apple computer.
I am.
No, but I think to your point, and again, I'm sure we will talk about this a lot in future podcasts as well. But yes, if you need money and you don't have money to spend, as little overhead as you possibly can, how do you make money from nothing? Services, consulting is a great way to do it. Again, if you have a way to either pay your bills, or again, all you need is like one or two little gigs, you've got the network to do it, to get up and running. Or again, if there's other ways you can maintain a part-time job, or again, a full-time job and you have extra time, that's all great. But yeah, if you need money and you're not ready to just invest a bunch of money, I personally would recommend service business if at all possible.
Word.
All right. Thank you all for watching. We really appreciate it. As always, questions, comments, concerns, direct them to Miss G. P. Benito. No, but full on DM us, YouTube, comment, Facebook, comment. We will see all of them at some point, and be happy to respond. And I also would say you can also shoot us an email at hello@cheekycocktails.co if you would like to. And we always love to hear from you. So thank you. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and talk next week.
Thank you.
Bye.